All right, hello. I apologize. My voice is a little out right now just from being a chair for my sorority's homecoming. But this is my research presentation on Dorothea Dix. Okay, so introduction and early life. So Dorothea was born on April 4th, 1802 in Maine, and then her and her family moved to Massachusetts not long after. She had her parents, Joseph Dix, who was a preacher, and her mother, Mary, who really didn't work because she suffered a ton from mental illness. Mainly, majority was depression. Um, she was always seen as a very bright little girl, somebody that learned to read and write very quickly. So her father used religious tracts in the Bible, being a preacher, to teach her truly how to read and write. But then, not long after, they realized that she needed more of a lifestyle um, that would fit her, somebody that could be around, take care of her, get her into more schooling and teaching. So by the age of 12, she had moved to Boston to live with her wealthy grandmother, who was also named Dorothea. And I forgot to address the one, her family life was very unstable since her mother suffered from mental illness, depression so severely, and her father wasn't around as much because of traveling. She just never had anything stable or not much of a role model or anything in that aspect, which is also another reason why she moved to Boston to live with her grandmother. Okay, so early work. Dorothea first started actually teaching girls, not just going to school and learning herself, teaching by the age of 14, which to me is just the craziest thing ever because I personally could not imagine teaching and giving people that sort of guidance at the age of 14. But her first school she opened up was for just young girls, and she actually ran it out of her grandmother's home. The curriculum included reading, writing, arithmetic, which obviously is math, and moral lessons. So not only was this for an actual education like reading, writing, math, but also this was so girls could grow up with knowing what morals are and how to handle them and present them to others. Because these were young girls who didn't have um, stable homes, kind of like the way that Dorothea grew up originally. Um, she emphasized a lot of self discipline and compassion in her teaching, which goes a lot along with the moral lessons. She just knew that these girls needed that kind of guidance, and she was very good at providing that for them. Later, she founded a free school for poor children, which, if you can think about it, in this day and age was insanely progressive because not many people could develop any sort of work, schooling, anything like that without some sort of income coming in because everybody needed the funds, everybody needed money. So doing that kind of like a charity work or a nonprofit as we would consider today, that was insanely progressive for her time. So by the 1820s, she developed a private school, which only was for the most wealthy families in her community. Like there was payment, there was certain requirements, there was a harder and more intense curriculum. Like this was a very different situation, and she was the one to develop that. And in the 1830s, she developed a chronic illness. They believed it could have been some sort of tuberculosis, something respiratory, and traveled to England for recovery. And I know you're probably like, why did you put that on this slide? Because whenever she went to England and kind of went MIA from everybody, she brought a lot of like a humanitarian idea, more psychology, medical knowledge back from England from what she learned from the people who took care of her there. So, discovering the problem. This is where we kind of start getting into the more medical psychology of what she actually did. She in 1841 decided to start teaching Sunday school for women in jail. Um, it was said that like the minute she walked in, she knew that something was wrong because it was disgusting, cold, filthy, abusive. There were prisoners that were chained and they were naked, and there was no medical care or no prisoner separation, which means if you were with a more violent prisoner, say somebody who was arrested for sexual assault charges, murder, homicide, manslaughter, anything of that aspect, like a person like that could be put in the same cell as somebody who was just arrested for theft and probably wasn't considered violent. So on top of that, not only was there no separation, if you were hurt by one of these prisoners, there was no um, infiltrate or any sort of medical place that the hurt prisoner could be taken. So a lot of the times with such poor conditions, normally they would develop some sort of infection and pass away. And then the almshouses, which actually I've never heard of this until doing my research, they were poorhouses. Kind of think of it as like a really poorly ran like homeless shelter in a way. You had a few more resources than what you would in prison. However, conditions were still awful. And there was just not much there. But as sad as all of this is, because she visited around, I think they said over 100, if not hundreds, of places in 2 years. Once she figured out how bad conditions were, that this awakened her lifelong mission to treat mentally ill and people who truly need help. So, mental health was probably her biggest advocacy, something that she worked incredibly hard for. Of course, this was probably something I would think would be very near and dear to her heart because she had a personal connection with her mother. Um, Being someone personally myself who deals with clinical depression and anxiety, I just always know I feel very connected to somebody who advocates for this or works for this or somebody who relates. So she went around and started documenting all of the people who were in prisons or what we would consider like a poorly ran psych ward. um, it was nothing but physical abuse. There was nothing kind or compassionate or patient about the way that these people were handled. Um, so she compiled all of these findings into memorials and submitted them to the state legislator to try and get these conditions changed. And she did that for 32 mental hospitals over the US, providing moral treatment and long term care for people who need it. So, like schizophrenic patients or people that need to be somewhere that cannot care for themselves or would be a danger to like a family member, a family friend, whoever would be taking care of them. She developed some place that you could stay long term to have 24/7 care. So her main connection to psychology, I think it's pretty obvious talking a lot about mental health, but a lot of it aligned later with psychology models that people like Freud developed, showing how important mental health is and that it's not just like you're not just crazy. It's nothing like that. There are genuine medical and psychological issues with these people, and she influenced a ton of early psychology and psychiatry focus on the environment and emotions because, as we all know, environment is plays a huge factor in the way you think and the way you act. So this was a huge finding, knowing that with improved conditions and with the right kind of care and patience and calmness for these people that need that extra step, they really started to deep dive into that's what their brain needs, which really relates back to the psychology. Why I personally relate to her, I am a health science major in a pre-PA field, so this was always something that I was interested in, and I have a psychology minor. I've heard about her from so many different people, and as I've stated before, I'm a huge advocate for mental health. So here are her quotes. I'm not going to read through them completely, but as you read them, you can just tell that she knew that there was an issue and she knew that these people were not being treated correctly, and she wanted to be an advocate for that and show that they are not insane, but people have neglected them and not given them the care that they deserve. And then these are my references. Thank you.